Good evening. I am John Van Tassel, Supervisor of the Town of Philipstown, and I would like to welcome everyone to this joint session of the Village of Nelsonville, Village of Cold Spring, and the Town of Philipstown Board. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide information in response to questions regarding the proposed Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. This is not a public hearing, and the boards will conduct no actions or make any decisions. As per our town attorney, the only motion required is to adjourn the meeting, which will happen with a hard stop at 9:30 p.m. I would like to thank my colleagues for all their effort. This has been put into this elective exercise. I would also like to thank the Haldane Central School and Dr. Phil Benante. The Putnam County Sheriff's Office, the Cold Spring Police Department, Town of Philipstown Code Enforcement Officer Greg Warner, Cecile Roars for recording, Damian McDonald for assisting with AV. I would also like to welcome New York State Parks as well as Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail for assisting us in providing our information to our constituents. Some ground rules for this evening. There is obviously an abundance of interest as well as emotion for this topic. I am confident that the residents of our town will remain professional and respectful. We will not tolerate outbursts or any personal attacks. I suggest if you feel you are losing control of your emotions, you step out of the room. There will be no warnings. Again, this is not a mandatory exercise for any of the municipalities that are here, and if we feel it's no longer a productive format, we will adjourn. I would now like to introduce the Town Board of the Town of Philipstown, Deputy Supervisor Robert Flaherty, Councilperson Judith Farrell, Councilperson Megan Cotter, and Councilperson Jason Angel. To my left, I have Mayor Kathleen Foley from the Village of Cold Spring. Mayor Foley, could you introduce your boards?
With us tonight is Deputy Mayor Tweeps Phillips Woods, Trustee Catherine Fatty, Trustee Laura Bosey, and Trustee Eliza Starbuck, who will be managing the timer.
Also to my left is Mayor Chris Winward of the Village of Nelsonville, and she can introduce her board, please.
From Nelsonville, we have Deputy Mayor and Trustee David Maroney, Trustee Travis Bureau, Trustee Thomas Campanile, and Trustee Maria Zainovich.
Okay, so the flow for the meeting tonight, our first priority is to get through the priority questions which you have submitted, which with shared moderation by the mayors and myself and Councilman Angel, who I'd like to thank for putting together the entire program, for submitting the questions, as well as collating the answers and responses for the top questions. We do plan on having an open comment from 9 to 9:30 if time allows. We will have a hard stop at 9:30, and again, I request everybody, beg everybody to remain respectful, neighborly, and productive. Okay, so introductions we've been through, town JVT. We will go to my presentation at this point.
Actually, our guests.
So, just introduce our guests. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Introduce him. Yeah.
If you guys wouldn't mind, please introducing yourself. Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us tonight. We have guests from the Office of New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail.
Good evening. I'm Linda Cooper. I'm the Regional Director for the Taconic region of New York State Parks. Taconic region is one of 11 regions in the state, and that encompasses the parks, historic sites, and trails in Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and Columbia County. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for coming out to listen.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Davidson. I'm a Deputy Commissioner with State Parks, and I'm the Commissioner's designee overseeing this project and our efforts to support it and oversee it.
Hi, I'm Richard Shea, a lifelong resident of Cold Spring and Philipstown, former town supervisor, former town board member, former caretaker at Little Stony Point. I have over 30 years of community service in this community, so I'm glad to see everybody out. There's going to be a great discussion. And currently a board member of the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, the newest member.
I do ask everybody that they treat Richard with extra kindness because he's a little sensitive about being in front of a room like that.
And hello, I'm Amy Kacala. I'm the Executive Director of Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. And thank you to the communities for organizing this. We're really excited to be able to talk to all of you tonight and answer your questions. And I did also just want to assure you, I know there was a prioritization exercise that took a lot of effort for the communities to organize. And we'll be answering 15 questions tonight, but we wanted to assure you at the start of the evening, we'll be answering all 210 that were submitted. Well, I guess minus the 15 we'll answer tonight. So thank you.
And I don't actually see all the folks in the room that I'm supposed to introduce, but we have with us somewhere Lydia Biskup, who's the Chief of Operations for New York State Senator Rob Rollison. Oh, way up there. Hi. Victoria Caffarelli, who's the Chief of Staff for our Assembly member, Dana Levenberg. There she is in the back. The Putnam County Executive Kevin Burns sends his regrets, and he has asked Transportation Director Vinnie Tamagna to stand in his stead this evening, so he's with us for the county. As is our District 1 legislator, Nancy Montgomery. And lastly, the MTA was actually able to send someone to join us. May Patel is here. She's the Assistant Director of the Metro North Railroad and is able to join us.
Thank you. So myself and the two mayors will just briefly go through our feelings where our jurisdictions begin and end in this project. So I will start off, if that's okay.
Yep.
I would like to take a moment to address the sections of the trail that will fall within the town of Philipstown outside the boundaries of the village of Cold Spring. During my 40 years of emergency services and the past 14 years on the town board, there has been a consistent request that New York State provide more services to the 9D Breakneck Corridor. We have continued to work with the agents of New York State Parks towards a safe way to handle the crowds we often experience. As the supervisor, I am often addressed by constituents to do something about the crowds. I nor the town have the capability of limiting the number of visitors that decide to come here and take in the amazing place we live. Since limiting is not an option, we need to prepare and have resources and amenities to assist with safe enjoyment for tourists as well as our residents. The town of Philipstown provides limited direct resources to that area of the township. We are responsible for providing EMS and fire service. As the budget officer of the town of Philipstown, it is my responsibility to address any increase, if any, in call volume that the proposed trail would cause. I have seen estimates that reflect a 20% increase in volume to that area, which is just that, an estimate. No one has a crystal ball and can give accurate statistics of the future. The demand would also be affected by the increase in the amenities in the region. I look forward to a continued commitment by New York State Parks, HHFT, and the town of Philipstown to provide safe enjoyment to tourists as well as residents of the Hudson River and the trail system. I also expect any additional financial demand placed on the town to be addressed. Again, this is my concern as the town supervisor, and I have a firm belief in home rule and expect that the sections that fall within the boundaries of the village of Cold Spring will be negotiated with the village Board of Trustees and Mayor Foley, and I also encourage the Village of Nelsonville's concerns to be addressed with their board and Mayor Winward. Thank you.
Thank you. While the Village of Nelsonville doesn't have any official jurisdiction in the area, we do have, obviously, some concerns on the potential impact of the Fjord Trail. The first is the quality of life of our residents. We are an important part of this community, too. Our border is only a quarter mile from the one traffic light in Cold Spring, and our quality of life suffers when we cannot access the cultural, environmental, and commercial hub that we moved here to enjoy and that we help to contribute to. Second, financially, the Nelsonville Woods trails link directly to the state's Undercliff and Washburn trails within the Hudson Highlands State Park. We are concerned about the potential impact of an already overburdened trail system spilling into the Nelsonville Woods, which we are financially responsible for, including liability insurance. Similar to what is already successfully used in other New York State parks, it would be great to see what visitor management systems could be smartly employed for the Fjord Trail and identify a maximum number of daily visitors. We also have two very small parking lots at the Nelsonville trailheads that could be impacted if there is a strong influx of additional hikers, one of the lots being off a single-lane private road. The last area is shared services. Nelsonville's residents are also served by contract with the Cold Spring Fire Department, and most of our residents' water is supplied by Cold Spring. After last year's drought, any potential additional burden on our community's water supply is concerning. Thank you.
So I don't think there's any question that the Village of Cold Spring is the community and the municipality most impacted by the proposed Fjord Trail, particularly with the route through Dockside that has been described by senior parks officials as the donor's preferred pathway. The Dockside property belongs to New York State Parks. It's a state park within our municipal boundary. The village manages Dockside under contract with no maintenance or programming funding from the state. The current contract is due to expire in 2028, but can be extinguished with notice at any time. Twice, the property was offered to the Village of Cold Spring, and twice, the village declined. This is some years ago now, it's not recently. The choices made were penny-wise and definitively pound-foolish. We'd be in a very different position right now if the village had said yes either time. But we're not, here we are. The village does have a status in the State Environmental Review for the proposed Fjord Trail, though it's limited. The village is considered an interested agency in that review, meaning that it lacks jurisdiction to fund, approve, or directly undertake the project, but can participate in the review process. Our planning board is identified as having site plan approval, and our board of trustees can comment on the master plan. Both boards need to engage and listen to the public. New York State has, in terms used by other senior parks officials, superior sovereignty over the villages and the town. That means that the state can declare itself immune from local land use requirements. Perhaps the state can declare itself immune, but should it? That's one of the questions that we need to ask. In recognition of village residents and their quality of life, I would say no. With the fundamental impacts this development will have on our village, good and bad, I would say no. In recognition of all the burdens and costs of state park visitation already borne solely by Cold Spring villagers, I would say no. In recognition of the self-determination that is enshrined in local government, I would say no. We're fully aware that the village cannot solve the challenges of visitation on our own. We need New York State, we need Putnam County, and we need HHFT to work with us as equal partners on decisions impacting life within our municipal boundaries. Villagers should have a real say in whether the trail begins within the village and how it's accessed via our streets. There is no route through the village that keeps visitors off residential streets. They're all residential, and they all deserve the respect of having visitor impacts mitigated by New York State, no matter where the fjord trail starts. Whatever final form the fjord trail takes after the multi-year public process that's about to come, the village deserves appropriate impact mitigations, ones that we can all live with. I hope that our municipal neighbors in Philipstown and Nelsonville will support decisions that will protect the village long-term. We want visitation managed. There's no disagreement on that. We all want visitation managed. And we want to survive as a vibrant, desirable residential community and a thriving local economy. So we need to keep talking, and that's why we're here.
So just a few words about the process. As representatives of your municipalities, as community members, we all obviously know that the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail is an issue that people feel very strongly about, both with concerns, both those in support, and both those that fall somewhere in between. And so we wanted to organize a conversation that was as productive as possible, that was community-driven, and that focused this conversation on the top priority questions of the community. And so just a report on the process, we asked for any resident of Philipstown to submit their priority questions related to the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. We received 217 questions, so for all of you who read them out there, congratulations, thank you for doing that. It was an educational experience. We removed 7 of those questions because of non-residents or because no residents given. That's all we did. Those 210 questions were then included publicly without any other alteration. 146 residents participated in the ranking process. 7 were removed from that ranking vote process because they were non-residents. And so we came down to these top 15 questions we're going to discuss tonight. I guess the only word I would say is that there's no such thing as a perfect process. So we all know that. But the one thing I hope everybody here does realize is that we are trying to organize this meeting in a way that has a commitment to openness, to transparency, and to really the idea that the local community and community members should be a part of kind of driving the conversation in this process as it goes forward. And so just a few notes. The guests from New York State Parks and Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail were given 10 minutes to respond to those 15 questions. You do not have to take all the time if you don't want, but you have 10 minutes to respond to those questions and to each question that's asked. And then we will move on to the next question. We'll get to as many of those top 15 as possible. And then every resident who submitted a question was asked to read it here tonight. Thank you for those of you who could make it. If they could not make it, then a moderator will be reading it on their behalf. All right, thank you. And I will turn it over to Mayor Winwood.
Thank you. So let's kick off the questions. We're going to have kind of an on-deck circle, so I'll call the first folks, and then 2 if you don't mind being steady and ready to go. The first section is on accountability and transparency, and the residents who submitted questions, first coming up is Alice Krakauer, and then on deck will be Cynthia Kling for her husband Phil Weiss, and Stephanie Hawkins. Thank you.
All right, Alice.
Does this go like this? It goes like this. Okay. Your ads claim that the Fjord Trail is community-driven.
I'm sorry. Alice, can you just ask the question as you proposed?
It needed the setup. I'm going right there. So my question is, will the Fjord Trail be built even if a majority of people in the community are against it?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that question feels like something that's a dialogue ender, not the beginning of a conversation. I understand the question, I appreciate that, but I think this is the continuation of a process that's been going on for many, many years. I mean, since 2015 and prior to that in a more informal way. It was a community-driven initiative, and I know that because I was one of the founders of the idea. So it was myself, Julia Famularo, Mike McKee, Hank Osborne, handful of other community members. So the idea, the impetus for this was to solve existing problems. Everyone looks at the 9D corridor and they wonder, when is that accident going to happen? When is somebody going to get injured there? So taking that as the fundamental basis for solving the issues, or that as an approach, saying, what can we do to make sure people are safe when they visit the area, along with residents who use the corridor. And it's really a complicated corridor because you have so many authorities in there. You have parks, you have DOT, you have Metro North, you have DEP, DEC. So getting all these people together has been this colossal effort. And over the years, over a decade, that has taken place. Brought everyone to the table, open discussions. There have been forums in the past where community members have attended those. I don't know if people who here had attended the event at the Chalet. But since its inception, it has been a community-driven idea and something that I really support. Again, the Fjord Trail doesn't exist today, but the problems do. And these problems aren't going to go away without a solution, without people working on it. And I think tonight is not the beginning of the process. As I said, it's a continuation. We're in the middle of a process. So to ask what will happen if no one wants this, well, it's sort of a loaded question. There are also numerous communities involved. If you're looking at... Hold it. There are numerous communities involved. You have Cold Spring, you have Fishkill, you have Beacon. There are a lot more people involved, a lot more communities involved. And we are looking for input from everyone. This has to be an open and honest discussion. And Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail is interested in what people have to say, and that input is taken seriously. We need good ideas. When I served on the town board, any local initiative that came along, you have a public hearing, you hear from the public, and then the outcome gets better because somebody comes up with a good idea. So that's what I'm hoping is going to happen out of this process.
Okay, next.
Okay, let's be courteous, everybody.
So I'll finish it a little. So as Richard said this, so we'll just skip ahead. But just to keep in mind, this grew from the locals, and yes, it feels like a big coalition project now, but it's really had a long story in the community. And I think the answer is, it should never be that, you know what I mean? It came from the community, it's been refined by the community. And the story, I think the message I'd really like everyone to walk away with today is that we're going to keep refining. So it's already refined several times over the past, and we're continuing to refine today. So if like just not even going back as far as 2006, but in 2015, we had a safety focus. At that time, people really wanted to see more people come to Main Street. You wouldn't say that today. So we went and we changed it. Visitation was getting too high, the COVID pandemic, equity considerations hit more in people's minds, and we refined, and we included accessibility, and we really thought about visitation management versus encouraging people into the downtown. And we really thought, if you have to have all these people coming by your door, how can this place be retained for uses that you currently enjoy and create recreation assets? I mean, you're the daily users, you're not the weekend people. This is really mostly going to be used by locals. We wanted to make sure those needs were reflected in the design.
Okay, can we please be polite and courteous so we can get through as many folks as we can tonight?
No, you haven't.
So one question.
She's the next.
So just to let you know where we are right now in our refinements, we're looking at the environmental review is underway. We had consultants look at ADA accessibility on the project, and we have visitation management consultants just starting with us to think about what are the tools we really need to have all of in our pockets, and even think about what's on the ground so that we're making sure this really manages visitation. And sustainability is always a focus for us too. So we have the draft master plan. Before that is a final master plan. We will have additional refinements, and your input is going to help shape what that looks like.
Thank you. We have our next question asker.
No.
Sorry, are you guys satisfied with your response? No further?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, didn't want to cut you off.
So you guys have,
Sorry, go ahead.
this is for my husband. I like this plan when it was a wooded trail back in 2015. It transformed into a concrete extravaganza that will scar the landscape forever because of the influence of a private donor, Chris Davis. Even parks deferred to him and his grandmother's vision. Who elected him, and how is he accountable for the millions of dollars he's given? Question.
I knew that'd get a good response. You know, there are a lot more than one person involved in this process. And when you look around this room tonight, everyone here is involved in this process. It's not just about one person.
We all know we all are, but
it never was about one
Cynthia?
person. New York State Parks does not defer to any one individual. I've worked with New York State Parks for 20 years. I've never seen that happen. To go back to the concept of the trail, and you know, I am, for public disclosure, Phil Weiss is one of my best friends. So, the concept of the trail has evolved over time, but it is not a concrete extravaganza. And again, there are aspects of this trail that are still being designed with public input and that are bound to change based on community input. That is my hope. I'm hoping that people actually feel heard tonight and that their input has an impact on the process. I wouldn't be up here if I didn't believe in this, if I didn't believe it was an open and honest discussion. So it was seen as a good idea fundamentally. That's why it attracted this attention. That's why it attracted funding, because connecting the community of Cold Spring, Philipstown, excuse me, with Beacon is fundamentally a good idea. And it's a good idea because it gains people access to the Hudson River. It spreads people out. It disperses people. When you have everyone just concentrating in the village of Cold Spring, it's overwhelming. Anyone who goes down Main Street in this village on a weekend knows just that. So the idea of spreading people over 7.2 miles developed, saying, how can we get people off the Main Street of Cold Spring and out onto a trail where they can go to another destination, and vice versa. So you have the railroad line there. It's not a concrete extravaganza. I know these things like to be bandied about.
Can we talk about Chris Davis and his 20 million? That was the question.
Now, Cynthia, I know you asked your question, and I'm giving a response, and I will get to that in order, yes. So if it's okay with you, I'll continue. Okay, thank you. The majority of this trail is envisioned as a gravel trail, as sort of the thing you would see at Hubbard Perkins, the sort of thing you would see down at Dockside currently. It'll be wider because it needs to accommodate more people. It needs to accommodate people with disabilities, people with different abilities. It needs to provide a surface and access for everyone. We love this area. Look, I was born here. My son is the 5th generation to be born in this community. I have worked my entire life to preserve this community. And if I thought this was going to destroy this community, there's no way I would be up here tonight. I do not think that. Do I think the ideas can get better? I think it can get better with your input. But I don't think it's going to get better if we set up camps. I think that we need to be smart. These are complex issues. They require a lot of thought. And there is a tremendous amount of expertise going into this. To get these experts to do traffic studies, to do the impact statements, to talk about the environment, to talk about water, to talk about all the resources that we care about, you need experts. That costs money. And the state of New York is firmly rooted in partnerships. So they have partnered with a group of individuals. They have partnered with the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. Chris Davis is among those people. Chris Davis is a 30-year resident of this community. People seem to glaze that over. So what? So he has helped this community. I'm getting to that. He has helped this community in innumerable ways. He stopped development at the Garrison Golf Course, a 300-acre site that could have been heavily developed under past zoning. I think people forget that. He helped this community with the rezoning to make sure we would protect all the resources that we treasure here, the things that we want to see protected. He helped with simple things like townwide cleanups. He would provide funding for that. He's provided funding for any number of projects for this town. But that doesn't mean that he's the only person driving the bus here. It doesn't mean that New York State Parks defers to Chris Davis. They don't. They are the authority in this. They are the lead agency in this. Chris Davis is a contributor. He's a partner. There are other large contributors to this. There are over 20 entities involved in this. There are several individuals who have committed large amounts of funds. New York State has committed $20 million to the Breakneck Project. So that may come as a surprise to some people. So they should. But New York State does not have endless resources. New York State needs partnerships to develop the programs that will save local environments. So I think that in all fairness, it is a fair question. And I know that perception is out there. But we can't focus on one individual. We can't villainize people. We can't try to create a boogeyman.
We're not trying to villainize anybody
Okay, Cynthia,
at all.
Cynthia,
Well,
Richard's
no one,
speaking now. Richard
no
has
one,
the floor.
I'm just saying we need to avoid that. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying we need to have this be an open and continuing, honest discussion. These are frank questions and these are frank answers. So, I mean, give your input, but be smart, and most of all, be nice about it. I know this is an emotional issue. People are tied to this landscape like nothing else. I mean, I myself, I feel that way. But you need to be smart about this. You need to consider all the options, and you need to give good input so we get a good outcome.
Thank you, Richard. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Stephanie
I'd like
Hawkins.
Can you hear me? I'd like to
Oh, I'm
add
so
one
sorry.
more.
Please add.
We've got 3 minutes.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
I'd just like to say one more thing. Thank you, Richard. That was very, very well said. I would like you all to know that New York State Parks is not dictated to by any individual. New York State Parks listens to communities. We work very, very well with the communities that surround our parks. We are there for all people. I can also tell you that there is no way that state parks would be able to afford the studies and the analysis that is now going into the Fjord Trail, in large part to answer your concerns. And there's no way that we could afford to do that if we didn't have a partner like Fjord Trail. So please, please don't think that Parks is being influenced by Chris. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for being here. I would have brought it to read, but it's up here. So it's understood there's a fine line in this so-called public-private partnership between New York State and Scenic Hudson/Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. If this is truly a public project exempt from local planning board oversight, then agenda and minutes from meetings under this partnership would be required under open meetings law. If this is truly a private project, then local board oversight is required by law and minutes can be hidden/withheld from the public. In this case, which is it? Ethically, you shouldn't claim both. Wouldn't you agree? And the question is, there isn't the yes or no, wouldn't you agree? It's, in this case, which is it?
What was the last?
So, thank you. There are very clear roles and responsibilities between Fjord Trail and between state parks. I'll get to that in just a second, but first I'd like to talk about how Parks uses and frankly needs partnerships. We have all sorts of partnerships with all different kinds of organizations, not-for-profits, for-profits, large, small. We really cannot we cannot carry out our mission of providing safe and enjoyable recreation for 80 million people in the state of New York each year if we didn't have strong, robust partnerships. We just mentioned our budget is such that we do a tolerable job maintaining our parks, but there is no way that we could provide the amenities that we do today without partnerships. In most cases, the partner brings much needed funds as well as expertise, talents, all sorts of other qualities to things that we can't do. There's no way that the state would be able to operate 20 different group camps for disadvantaged children from New York City with our staffing. We can't do that. In this case, this is a complicated, Richard mentioned all of the state agencies. There is no way that we could conduct this project if we didn't have strong partners. And it's not just with Fjord Trail, it's a partnership with your communities all along the trail that are so important to us.
So could you answer the question?
I'm getting to
Could
it.
you answer the
I'm
question,
getting
please?
it. I got 8 minutes. So there are a couple, as I said, there are many partners that we work with. The Olana Partnership and Walkway Over the Hudson are two of our strongest partners. And anyway, those of you who know these parks know how important the partners are to us. I would like to get to, though, and I see the time, I'd like you to understand the clear roles and responsibilities between the two of us. So, State Parks owns a significant amount of the trail property already. We will also be the owner of the real estate interests through easements from Metro North in particular. And we will hold those, and the trail will then be built on park land or park control property for the most part. There are also some private owners that property that the trail will cross, and that is not our purview. We are collaborating, but in no way dictating, the plans for the trail. We have our own needs. We would like to make sure that the trail is accessible to all, and that particularly people from disadvantaged communities have the right to use it and recreate here.
Can I just ask you to answer the question about distinguishing between...
I'm answering.
Right. But I don't think anybody here is going to argue against these good objectives that you're pointing out. But I think the very simple question that's being asked is this a public project?
No.
Or is this a private project?
It is neither. It is a parks project.
You can't, but hold on.
Wait a second. Yeah. This is a project of New York State Parks.
Okay.
It's a parks project.
Okay.
It's like any of our other projects. We go through our planning. Mm-hmm. We go out to bid for construction. Mm-hmm. This is a parks project. We are working closely with partners.
Great. That's great, and I appreciate the need for public-private partnership to get things done. The issue that we run into here is not everything is open to the public, right? You're saying this is a public project, but there are not minutes to meetings that go straight to the heart of decision-making for this project, and when people seek them out, they are told, oh, no, this is a private situation.
Okay, so Stephanie, excuse me, we've got the question.
I really don't want to get into that, but I can tell you that we are committed to being very transparent. Hold on. Okay. We can't be transparent when we're in the middle of negotiating various things. We can come to you. We will make all of the documents available to anybody who wants to see them, but not while we're making the sausage.
So, Matt, if I may, the existing contract, the signed contract, is available on the village website that describes the legal agreement, the initial legal agreement between HHFT and Parks, and thank you to the person in the room who foiled it and provided it to the village. So you can see that relationship there. your question has not been answered, but I think that's the answer that you're going to get. And so to keep the flow moving, we'll
This
call.
is a parks project.
I would like to just.
I thought the question was to Parks, and I thought they had time to respond. I didn't realize it was just going to turn into an
I would like
open
to remind,
forum.
Mayor Foley, can I make it just a reminder,
Go
just
ahead.
because the hope here was tonight that we could get to all top 15 questions, and we're not going to be able to do that if we have back and forth between questioners, and I'm sorry to say that. And I know that we said that the question should just be read as submitted because that's what people voted on. So just to remind us, I mean, and also I think over 30 people signed up for public comment. So if we could just follow asking a question, allowing for a response so we can get through them.
I appreciate that. I think people who submitted the questions and who are asking the questions, myself included, do want the question to be answered, and I appreciate that. Don't clap because it takes up, if you clap, it takes up time. But I think that in pushing back here, our interest is to try to keep the answer focused on answering the question, not the sort of the flora around it.
We're with you,
So
Seth.
anyway, but I understand that what you're saying is that you said this is a public project. That's great. I expect that all minutes and agenda for those meetings to be available to the public. Right?
I'm not at liberty to say
Right.
whether they can be.
Okay. But you're
I
subject to
can
open
tell
meetings
you
law,
that
right?
we will let you know what happens. We will, you know.
Yes, we have been told what has happened.
No,
so far.
listen, it doesn't do us any good to hide things, right? I mean, this supposition that we're doing something devious behind your back is really detrimental, I think. We're not, right? We're not.
Okay.
Well, first of all,
The comments
process
need to
is
stop.
just
If we want answers, we need to be
okay.
courteous and let them respond, please.
So the important thing I would like to say is in terms of roles and responsibilities between the public New York State Parks and our private partner here is essentially that New York State holds the real estate, will hold the real estate for the trail, and that the Fjord Trail will operate, maintain, repair, and staff it, right? That's the basic responsibilities of the two different parties.
Okay, and the decision-making around the development and the ideation and that goes into creating this trail, where is that? Who holds that? Is
So
that Parks?
the next, so we are in the process of doing a generic environmental impact statement along the whole trail. We are collecting ideas from experts, from park staff, from many different people. I think all of the input that you've put into the various meetings that the Fjord Trail has already had, they're influencing that. You will have the opportunity to review, to comment, to bicker with, to do whatever you want with that. It doesn't move forward without public comment.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Can the
Not
audience and
Thank you.
Stephanie also, please? Thank you.
Okay, Andrew Hall is up. We're moving on to the next category.
I just wanted to follow up with that. I would say,
Richard,
as a member,
Richard, we're moving on. He does?
Still
You have a
has
minute and a
time
half.
on
You
the
have a minute and a
10-minute
half.
agreed upon.
It's a minute and a half.
Still has time.
I appreciate that response.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's a minute 27 left, and believe me, I'm only going to take about a minute, okay, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. Yeah, a lot of that time got taken up in back and forth. But at any rate, my hope is that as a member of the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail Board, that it's a completely transparent process, that everything that comes out of minutes meetings that I attend is public. It doesn't matter that we may be uncomfortable or something like that. I don't know why there would be any discomfort. These are all public transactions. We want the input. I am there as a community representative. That was my role in getting on the Fjord Trail Board. So I could be there in the room. So it would be a public process. I don't believe that it needs to be closed to the public, but you can't have this sort of meeting every time you have a meeting. You'd never get anything done. But the minutes should be public. I agree with that. And the process should be open.
Okay, so we're moving on to trail design and scale of project. Andrew Hall is up first, and then if we could have Ned Roush on deck and Kathy Carnevale on deck. And yes.
So to the point of transparency and viable options, it's understood there is a... Oh, no, that's your question. What viable alternatives to the proposed Fjord Trail have been proposed and evaluated, including alternative alignments and no-build, no-action options? Why are earlier iterations, much smaller in scope, impact, scale, and cost to the taxpayer, no longer under consideration? What is the current status of any of these? And just so you know where I'm coming from, that question is pulled from the scoping document of which Parks is the lead agency. Thank you.
So why don't we have, after you've asked your question, why don't you have a seat and let them
I'd like
respond?
Parks to respond first, please.
I'm sorry?
I'd like the Parks Department to respond first, please.
Why? So we have the information on the alternatives analysis. So this was done as part of the 2015 plan, and some of you may have participated in this, and we looked at all of the different segments shown here in the rainbow kind of display, and just segment for segment, what are the different ways that you could make that connection? Those were all evaluated. They were taken out to the public. The public weighed in on the preferences. This shows the slide from an online survey, which we had really as a culmination of multiple workshops that went into the design. And we got input from respondents, so 464 people in this specific point of interaction. And really what that showed is that the preferred alignment that was in the 2015 plan, which hasn't really changed very significantly, was preferred strongly by the community. The red is no, and that's like 2 to 3% on any one segment. So then the neutral is the pale, and strongly like is in the dark green. So including the Little Stony Point to Breakneck Ridge Shoreline Trail, and the Metro North whistle stop at Dutchess Junction Park was the part that went up the hill as you go past Hartsook Lane. And this was the least liked one back then because it was really just seen as functional but not desirable. So when we went back to the 2020 plan, which in part was asked by the community really strongly at the last, the kickoff to the environmental review process, people came out in force to say, we live on Fair Street, we feel this is too impactful to us to have all of these people marching down our houses, we don't feel safe with our kids outside riding bikes, people throw garbage on my front lawn, please.
Hold on.
Not everybody, but a lot of people showed up. And so we had the ask made of us to look at other routes. And the then Mayor Morandi went out and did some surveys of the communities to say, along the Fair Street route, how are people feeling? Along, in this area of the village, how are people feeling about current traffic? How would they feel about additional traffic? And so that helped inform an alternatives analysis. We looked at all of these routes. So this is the preferred alignment. We said, what if we go this way? What if we go behind the depot? What if we go down Fair? And all the way up to 9D. So all of those were looked at and evaluated for how they would allow for people to make this connection. Again, ADA, can it have bikes? Is it going to overly impact Main Street? How many residents are impacted? There's a lot of factors that we looked at, and they're all listed here. So accessibility. So this was thoroughly analyzed. That will be contained in with the other alternatives, the whole alternatives analysis is part of the environmental review, as you said. So that'll all be in the DGEIS when it is made available for public comment. But so short answer is yes, most of which you've seen in great detail in prior iterations of planning, and additional content is going to be available for your review.
Do we have Ned?
So,
Or are you finished?
since we still have 6 minutes, I can't
Okay,
see that
I'm sorry,
void go
Richard.
unused.
Sorry.
No, I get. I would say just to say no final decisions have been made. Preferred routes, proposed trails. Just keep that in mind, that this is still an ongoing process and you have input.
Yeah.
Okay. Now Ned.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having this meeting. It's nice to see everybody, brought everybody together. The trail between Beacon and Cold Spring and Beacon is a great idea, but the add-ons, and by which I mean things like the amphitheater and forest nets and things like that, will change the character of the area the Fjord Trail claims to celebrate. Why must we accept the add-ons along with the trail? Thank you.
So just so that everyone's on the same page, let's just look at that. So what happened between 2015, when it was just a trail, and the 2020 master plan? So it's still a trail. It's still for bikes and peds. It's still connecting Cold Spring and Beacon and connecting people to the hiking destinations that are already a draw on 9D. We do have visitor orientation, that was in the last iteration, and wayfinding and signage was as well. So what are these additions or add-ons? Well, one is bathrooms and garbage bins. As much as it might seem surprising, that really wasn't thought through, like, how is that going to happen? And who's going to manage and pay for all of that? So it does have now an entity, HHFT, to staff and operate the trail, maintain it, and that would be a nonprofit funded thing, not coming from tax dollars. And then that staff's also available to help manage people on the ground and help with rescues. We'll have managed parking, including new parking at Duchess Manor, which would serve as sort of a main entry of our visitor center and staff offices. We have spots to rest and explore now. Before it was just a straight shot, but now you do have little spots where you could stop. And that helps as an accessibility piece, because some people might not, be in a wheelchair, but they might need to stop and pause every set distance. And so this is sort of something that helps augment that. And we also thought, again, about accommodating existing uses. So we had listening sessions, focus groups, and saw what are the management challenges on a place like Little Stony Point now. So any of the red dots were challenges that park staff are currently having managing things. And a lot of that is here because it's swimming, right? Swimming is illegal, there's picnicking that's illegal, there's garbage. So how do we kind of manage the space? And when we think about what happens there, what needs to be done to make those uses safer or to better control them? And one idea there is that there could be an outdoor classroom. It had been an amphitheater in sort of discussion. Based on community input, we've already scaled that down just to an outdoor classroom. And so that's a good example of how this is still up for discussion and conversation, and we need to have the input. And then responding to local recreation needs, so play spaces that aren't organized fields or tot lots for small children came up as a recreation need of the community. So we thought about where we might put that in. And this, again, was posters we had at Maple Syrup Day, not this year, the year before, and we got input from people, all sorts of dots about what people wanted to see there as activity spaces. And so that factored into what we put on the page, right? So this is always an iterative process. So Stephanie, you asked about meeting minutes. Sometimes that's hard because it's these sorts of things, but we do put those posters out, and when we have public sessions like we've had in the last months, those meeting summaries are made available on our website. And so it has all of the input we receive plus sort of a digested summary and what our takeaways are from what we're hearing. And then the next time we come out with something, it should be showing that input on the ground. We're strategically drawing people away from Cold Spring, and that's just part of that visitation management piece. So having that major gateway for this to be Duchess Manor, having things like maybe forest nets, we can talk about it, or it could be a canopy walk. The idea there is that you're creating something in a completely defunct, unused park space. It was an old Duchess Junction Park that still has a driveway down to it and some old play equipment, and could we put something there? And since you're in the forest, what would you put in the forest? So the part of what we want to do with this is have it be sort of an immersive experience, maybe an education experience to teach people about a forest ecosystem. So that would be the idea. It's not sort of a large trampoline, but again, we're always looking for input. So get involved, stay involved. We just started a new series of walk and talks where we look at one little part of the project area and talk about what's planned there and get input. So those will happen monthly on every second Saturday. We have committees and working groups that we'll be formulating. We'll have a community day on January 22nd. We put out a monthly meeting. And I'm going to start a new thing. I think it seems that questions and answers and just being able to have dialogue, and not everyone likes to get up to the mic. And so we always try to do different types of engagement things, small groups, big groups, open houses where it's a little free form, or major listening sessions like this. We've kind of done all of this through the 10 years that we've been going through.
It's quite annoying.
So if we're going to, keep doing all that, but if people want to just come and ask questions in a smaller setting that feels a little more comfortable, I want to offer that too. So we're going to start a monthly open house, hopefully at the lodge, and then we'll just, be there, and you can drop in, spend as much time, ask whatever questions that you have. So we'll be publicizing that and how you'll be able to put that on your calendar and come talk with us.
Okay, have you finished answering the question? Okay, just for clarity, I think that when the question was being asked about minutes, I think it was a reference to steering committee and other sessions. I think Richard's made a commitment tonight that minutes of meetings like that will be available going forward. Okay, do we have Kathy Carnevale in the room? She's not here, so I guess I am reading for her. Okay, it's a very Cold Spring question. Given the concerns about 600,000 visitors using the Fjord Trail and potentially swamping the tiny Cold Spring village on weekends, is it possible to have the Duchess Manor site be promoted from the outset as the focal point / centerpiece for HHFT visitors, particularly those coming by car? The central point would have trail info, food, tons of parking, and be the designated starting point for trail access. All trail guide brochures, advertising, and other marketing information would direct visitors to this central point, noting that other trail access points may be available. Surely some will still come by train to the Cold Spring, Beacon, and Breakneck stations, and others drive and park at other areas along the trail, but having the focus on this mid-trail site should cause less stress on Cold Spring Village resources and residents.
Agreed. So we have 6 entries to the park. And in the plan, right? So one is Beacon Train Station and Long Dock Park, Notch Trailhead, which is that area, that Duchess Junction Park area, which has planned parking, Duchess Manor and Visitor Center, and Breakneck Train Station, and the parking that would be there. Less parking than there is now, but there would be parking there. All of that's in Dutchess County. When you get to Putnam County, it's the Washburn Trailhead that's there, and Cold Spring Train Station. Note, we're never going to be saying go park in Cold Spring. We didn't include it in our parking and shuttle study. When we have directions for people, it's not going to say go to Cold Spring to park, right? So that is the plan. And so 6 entries, and we certainly want to make sure when the first phase opens, which is those improvements at Breakneck, we'd like Duchess Manor to open at the same time. So that's part of this phase 1. So that visitor center, when that all opens, we want people to get used to that behavior. Like, go to Duchess Manor. If you couldn't find parking at Breakneck, go up the hill and park at Duchess Manor and take the shuttle down. So the shuttle would be up and running, the visitor center would be there, and then we start that whole behavior of people knowing this. When I'm going to this space, I'm hopping into the middle, and I can go up to the Duchess Manor. And in the long term, we've started to think about what we would do there. This is the site. It's pretty big. It was a big facility. And so we're thinking this is going to be our offices for staff, so we're really local, and we have a presence here. We'll have connections down this very steep hill to the main trail that will run down behind it. We'll have the shuttle stop there, parking there, and then in the future, a visitor center with potentially a cafe. So then, if you're at Breakneck, you want to get something to eat, this is another option. So again, changing the options and the behavior on the ground with these little moves that we could do. And just to show, this is my favorite diagram. So the building was added onto over the ages, just to demonstrate we've started to think about this building, the age of the building, and what we might do as a restoration of the historic structure. And that'll be coming along soon because that has to catch up.
Are you finished?
Thank you. All right. Our next section is data studies, reporting, and project process. David Duffy is not here to give the question, so I will read it. The Fjord Trail will have a big impact, but we have no data on what this impact, social, environmental, economic, will look like. Where are the studies that typically accompany projects of this large scale? Can we expect to see such analyses so we can have a fact-based debate?
So I'm going to answer that one, and that is exactly what all of the consultants have been hired to do. So we are in the process of gathering, or we collectively, the project is in the process of gathering a lot of environmental review data. And that is what is studied in the draft generic environmental impact statement. And when it was set out in 2015 with the initial scoping document, these things are in them. The full scoping document is online, both on Parks website and on the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail website, so you can read it. But just generally, it goes into what are impacts of the land, what land use exists, what land use is proposed, what's there, what kind of geology, what is the topography, what kind of soils, so whatever you're going to do, what is the impact for that kind of soil? What watershed is it in? How does stormwater react? Where do we have washouts? What happens when there are storms? What happens with wastewater and sanitary water and well water or public water should you need it? What are the biological resources in the area? What kind of flora, what kind of fauna? Where do what are the birds? How do we look at them? And especially what are the rare and threatened and endangered species? We look at the historic and archaeological resources. And when I say we, again, Hudson Highlands Fjord has, using private dollars, hired outside consultants that are putting together a generic environmental impact statement. There has been, Hudsonia has been brought on to do baseline studies on a lot of the Hudson River material. There have been many, many different consultants that have been involved. Creighton Manning and Stedman Consulting are in doing transit. All of these people are extraordinarily well regarded in their fields, so they are helping to bring that data back to us to be in the analysis that would be part of the environmental statement. In any EIS, the environmental impact statement, you look at community attributes, and I know that's of tremendous concern. You wouldn't be in this room if that didn't concern you the most. What is the recreational and open space for the area? What is the growth and impact on community character? And I think that is really what drives a lot of the emotional response to the project. What are the socioeconomic factors that either drive the project or that the project will drive? And traffic and transportation, of course, near and dear in any community these days, especially with small single road systems where 301, Main Street, 9D define everything that happens, Fair Street define what happens in this community. So there's a look with both a transit consultant, a parking consultant, somebody that actually really knows and focuses about how do you make a shuttle system viable? What do you do? How would you make a parking system viable? Can you charge for it? Can you make reservations? How do you do that? And that, coupled with the Villages of Cold Springs parking study and the move toward some form of pay and display or some form of time to parking within the village, probably identifies a solution to some of the parking issues. Just over the years, just a small aside from the EIS, over the years, State Parks has been working with the DOT. That, therefore, you see a lot of no parking signs that never used to be there. And many other, there was a while where people were parking diagonally, and we put in parallel parking only, and people would get tickets, and they'd go, why did I get a ticket? And we'd say, because it was parallel parking only. And they say, but I'm parallel to the car next to me. No, it's, you need to, we're trying to teach new habits. So we want to get traffic calming. We want to be able to get so that, you've got a 40-mile below the tunnel. We want 40 miles above the tunnel. We want to be able to do that. And we can't do that without traffic calming. So some of those are under study. And as we look at that, we're going to also look at visitor management. That was on the slide before it. Okay, visitor management, visitor projections. what is the impact of construction? How does some of this happen? Does some of it come from the water? Does it come from the roadway? What happens? What are the impacts when and if there is construction? All of those things are looked at. Tonight when I was driving down 90, Saturday was when I was in the village and I'm driving on 90, and there was a young mom and her kid, exhausted, having hiked, and just basically just stopped on the side of the road. And you're worried that somebody's going to hit them between Stony Point and the tunnel. We're hoping to address some of those safety issues and get people off of 90. That is very much a thrust of what we are trying to do here. And go to the next one.
Linda?
Next one. Infrastructure. Hold on. Infrastructure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Infrastructure, the water supply, the electricity, the lighting, the roads and bridges. We heard you. We did already ask the village a number of years ago when Mayor Morandi was in office whether or not we could connect into public water and public sewer, and this even predates a lot of the fjord discussion. And we were told even at that time the sanitary sewer was probably fine, that the water might be a well situation and not a public water situation. That's what fact-finding does. You start to understand what is possible and what isn't possible. Emergency and public services, we've talked with Supervisor Van Tassel over many, many times over how can we support the local fire departments, how can we make sure that we can do a good job. And I will tell you, over the 12 or so years that I've been involved in state parks, the number of rescues has gone down. We have done better blazing. Our park manager, Evan Thompson, is in the audience, though he really doesn't want anybody to know it. And Evan, on any given night or weekend, could be out climbing with staff doing rescues. He, more than you, wants to reduce the number of people who are lost and who lose their way on the trails. And so we have tremendous respect for the police and fire and ambulance and emergency rescue, and want to ensure both our patron safety and any rescuer's safety. We really don't. What happens, by the way, most of our rescues, you should know, are not because there are people who, for the most part, who go out late, don't realize how long it takes, and then decide to cut straight down the mountain instead of following a trail. So then what happens when you go straight down one of our mountains around here? You hit a cliff. And when you hit a cliff, you go, holy moly, I can't get down. And so then you call for help. Nobody wants to be out rescuing somebody who's in a place where they can't get out of and you can't get into. So the Ninum Trail was built to help address that so people can get down easier. We can talk people and their GPSs out onto trails. We're doing that now. We'll continue to do that, but that is being assessed in the DEIS. Can you move on for a second? So the DGIS will not be ready. Now, this has been a point that people have had a difficulty understanding. This document started in 2015. It's been updated as the project has changed. So the project has changed. It has to get more information. It will not be ready by current projections till January 2024. I haven't read it. You haven't read it. The mayors haven't read it. We will all have an opportunity to read it. We will have a public hearing, probably if it's out in January, probably in February. Could be March, depending on the snows of this year. Who knows? But you would then have an opportunity to see what's in the document, and then there are months of getting your comments and going back and figuring out what doesn't work, what does work, how does this work, it's weighing it, and then it answers to those questions that come in the final environmental impact statement. It's an iterative process. It is not a one-and-done process. It's a process that is very publicly engaged, and we want your input, but we also need your patience because it's not here today. So what we're doing today is information gathering and getting your ideas, because it is my hope and my passion that we all collectively, that the many bright people in these villages and town can come up with a way to take our park and these communities and make an amazing publicly accessible trail that works for all, both the visitors and the communities.
Thank you.
And And I'll just add, there's a lot of questions on traffic and when are we taking traffic counts? And that's actually one of the things that's going to take a while, right? Because we can't count things that aren't there. So we have to wait until we go through the season, find different points through the season to take those counts. So we did take counts last fall, but we wanted to get a whole year of data to be able to inform the updates on those traffic projections. Oh. In the meantime, though, so this, am I out of time?
Sorry. The next group of questions involve increase in visitors. The first question is from Dave Morandi, and I believe I'll read it, Dave. Okay. How can HHFT and New York State Office of Parks and Recreation claim they are solving the Village of Cold Springs tourist problems when they are creating a major tourist attraction that will bring thousands more visitors to the Village of Cold Spring?
How did I get this question? Is this on still? No, there we go. Yeah, how did I get this question? The Fjord Trail's not built yet, and there are issues in the village. That can't be ignored. So there's a cost to doing nothing. There's a price to doing nothing. The issues need to be addressed in some form, and that's what these forums are about. You know, that's what this process is about. How will this project take shape? Will the project take shape? Because you hear from a lot of people, well, it seems like a fait accompli, nobody's listening to us. That's not true. This project isn't done. As you can see by the studies that are happening, by the depth of commitment from New York State, from all the involved agencies, people realize that this is bound to bring more people. The goal would be to disperse people, to disperse more people than actually come, to get them out on the trail. And it is understood that this is bound to be a popular attraction. These things tend to have a peak. When the walkway over the Hudson first opened, the first year, there was huge visitorship. Since then, it has steadily declined and leveled off. I'm there every weekend. John is there every weekend. Saturdays, you can ride across that bridge and you may see 100, 200 people. When they have events, there's more. But that is also at the discretion of the communities that these events will, impact. So if Cold Spring doesn't want to have events, they don't have to have events. We've heard a lot about concessions and things like that. Well, this is going to be like Bryant Park or Prospect Park. That's up to the Village of Cold Spring. Nothing is going to happen without a decision from the Village of Cold Spring. Nothing is going to be foisted upon the village. The village is in control of the village. So it's not as if State Parks or Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail is going to come in and say, hey, we've decided to have a concert down at Dockside this weekend. That's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen without discussions with the village, because the village is the authority. So people should be more comfortable with knowing that these things that are being thrown about as if they were fait accompli, they're not. They're not at all. And I'm not denying the fact that this may cause more people to visit the area. But the idea of doing nothing, the cost of doing nothing, when you look at the things that happened to Bull Hill before the new trails went in, before they started wayfinding, before they had directing people to keep them on hardened paths, you had a path that was 100 feet wide. The mountain was being destroyed. The same thing with Breakneck. The front of the mountain was being eroded. The degradation was happening all over because it was just a free-for-all. That's not tolerable. When you have people going around tagging, when you have people spray painting, there were spray-painted rocks you could see from across the river. You need management of these places. People need to be directed, and people need to take a sense of ownership when they're out there and just saying, if you see something like this, saying, look, this is not appropriate. This is crazy. You can't go around spray painting rocks the size of cars. It's ridiculous. This sense of ownership is what needs to happen. And I understand there is bound to be a spike in visitorship. Getting people out on a 7.2-mile trail is the goal of that. And you talk about, 600,000 people. There's already 480,000 people a year visiting this corridor. So that's a baseline number. They're looking at about 120,000 additional visitors over the course of a year. Not over the course of a day or a month. This is over the course of a year. If you can spread these visitors out from Cold Spring to Beacon, the hope is, and the studies will hopefully bear this out, that you will have a much more positive experience, that the village will see fewer people clogging the streets or clogging the sidewalks, that you can spread them out.
Hold it, not happening. Sorry.
So we understand the anxiety of even hearing it's just 100 and, more. It's a big number. The number is not 6 new, though. I think that's important for people to understand. You already have 480, so there'd be some more. And we are saying we're going to spread those out. Some of those people are arriving from Beacon or from the north, right? It's not all coming through Cold Spring, which I think is commonly thought of because that's kind of the existing behavior now, right? So what we're starting now, and this is the slide I'll go back to, we're starting a visitation management consultants work on this. So that's one of the refinements I talked about earlier on the master plan. We want to be able to have some experts who have been doing this for 30 years each come in and say, okay, sounds nice on paper, Amy, but is it really going to work? When you start to look at a model, build it into a model, see how this is going to work with the expectations of the projections, put them across the 6 entries, and then we talk about controls, right? So right now, anyone can hike Breakneck anytime. Do we think about things like reservation systems or things that can limit the numbers? So you're getting a limitation above what you have right now. So it's not just a free-for-all, like, let's see as many people as we can get here. What you want to do is manage for a desired condition. So I want more people over here because it's quiet and Beacon is okay with more people. They want less people. Like, how do we make that happen with attractions, with demand pricing, whatever? These guys list like so many tools and we haven't even really started working yet. But that's going to be a big, important community conversation to have, is to think about what do you want your experience to be in the downtown? What do you want experience to be at Little Stony Point? Is there too much program there? Do we have to think about scaling things down? Maybe something needs to move to another location. This is where we get to kind of move all of those levers to see if that's going to perform the way we're saying. It's not like we're just walking in here saying, trust us, we got this, right? Like, we do want to kick the tires on this, and we want you to help us kick those tires. So that's going to be a process. There'll be a local committee we want to really look at the projection assumptions, to look at the traffic counts. We're going to allow, like, when we form that committee, we're going to give them a stipend to hire their own consultant so that they can have them review the traffic study or, methodology and everything, so that you guys have full confidence when the data comes back that it's not something like, I understand that people are thinking like we're paying our consultants to say what we want them to say. So we're not, but I understand you feel that that's a possibility or a risk to you. So we're willing to put that extra layer of insulation or whatever, insurance on it for you. And then more public meetings that we hope people engage in. And so that's, we really need to get into those tools and infrastructures so that we can get to the right point.
And I think that the point needs to be stressed. The local committee, people from this room with the authority, and then also a stipend for their own consultant who will independently verify the results of the studies. Even though it goes through the seeker process, which is the State and Environmental Quality Review Act, that is a law that the state has to adhere to and that this whole project has to adhere to. So on top of that, a local committee with resources to hire an independent monitor for that.
Could I say thank you to that? This is something that the village has been asking for, and we're very pleased to hear that. It's the first that we're hearing it tonight, so thank you for that. It would be good to have clarification on how that committee is selected at some point.
Next up, Michael Bowman.
Go back like 2 or 3 slides, because there was an important point up there that you're gathering
Is it your
information.
question,
Can you
Michael?
address your question, Michael?
Just real quick though, you're gathering information this year, but you have the Breakneck Trail closed, so how is that information accurate?
Breakneck will be reopening in July 1.
All right, so all these studies will be done after the trail reopens. Okay, thank you. What is the projected increase in visitation to Hudson Highlands State Park, the Breakneck Trailhead, the Village of Cold Spring, and what methodology was used to arrive at these projections? Specifically, what time of year was the traffic data gathered, and what other projects, parks, and attractions were used as comparables?
So I think we've covered a lot of this. just starting. We've covered a lot of this in different pieces, but let's go through it again. So projected increases in visitation. So this is current, this is without fjord. And this is what Richard says when he says there's a cost to not doing nothing. There's not, a no action alternative is not meaning that this projected growth is not going, right? So this has been the trend line with real data that's been coming in. And then this is, where the future, based on that trend line, what the future would mean in terms of it going up, 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 up. So that's sort of the crisis moment that we're looking at, trying to get ahead of. And this infrastructure projects are very slow to move. But, this trend has been going up. I started, and I'll just say, in 2016 is when I had that public hearing for the start of the environmental review. And it was at that meeting that everyone said, in the last year, from 2015 to 2016, it's gotten too much. We feel like we hit a tipping point, was what I was hearing. And that's here, down here, versus where we are today, right? So it's going up, and that's part of so that's the answer to the projected growth to Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve. Breakneck, we have similar data about, which we've shared at different times. I didn't bring that graph with us today, but it's been going up. It went down a little bit because of bad weather one year. It's starting to moderate a little bit post-COVID because people are back to not, doing other things. They don't always have to be outside. And so this has been oft-cited, but what we have is, some additional visitation on top of what's already coming to the Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve that would result, we expect, as a result of the project. And again, some of that's in Beacon. It's never coming this way, right? But there would be some extra visitation on top of your already growth. However, I think it's interesting to think about how we might be able to reduce or control some of those peaks and valleys of through the year. You get these weekends where you get people hiking Breakneck. It's over, around 2,000 it can max out at. So if we had a reservation system that could control that number down, it might actually help smooth that out a little bit and reduce the total number from a hiking perspective. So ACARE, so we've looked at that. That's old data now. So I hate saying that because it's like it's old data, and I've been pressing ACARE to really review the projection. So they're updating that projection right now, and that's what that committee is going to review and make sure they agree with the methodology, and they'll kick the tires on the number before we take it back out to the public. So it's worth talking about, but it's being updated, so it kind of makes me squirm. And then the visitation management consultants, like I said, will take that and apply that across and do this whole model. So we'll look at that as part of the projections in terms of where we expect those people to go. So there's a whole number, but it's not expected that all of those people are coming through Cold Spring. So where are they going, and what are the assumptions that make us think they're going to go to Beacon instead, right? So we want to be able to talk that through.
You good? Okay.
Well, we already talked about the traffic data that we're gathering through the year. And parks and comps, that's going to matter more for the visitation management techniques we might try than I think the projections, right? So
Can New York State Parks talk about your park? Because this is your project, correct?
What Amy, is this on? Okay. What Amy said is correct. I don't think it's on. Is it on? Because I don't hear it. Do you hear it in the back? No.
It's green. Go closer.
Hello?
Anyway.
Go
It's,
closer.
okay, oh, it just went on. I have no idea what happened. Anyway, what Amy said is accurate. And if you're just looking for some comparables, just because Walkway was up there as a comparable. When the Walkway opened, everybody sees the iconic picture of the first day when Pete Seeger was up there, and they opened the Walkway, and 5,000 people came out, and it jammed full of people. You never saw that ever again. We average between 500, and the max we've ever had is 700,000. We're really around 500 to 600,000 a year. There are two fairly small parking lots flanking it, and there's always a space. It's never crowded. The city of Poughkeepsie has benefited restaurants, stores, places to be, and town of Lloyd's, the village of Highland. It just has not been the monster that this is portrayed to. So same thing with the Empire State Trail, 750 miles of trail going from New York City to Buffalo and going up through the Northway. The rail trails are going and they're connecting all over. And I don't know about you, but I love to get on a rail trail at point A, stop and have lunch in point B, then ride back, do something. And you don't usually see crowds and crowds of people. What you see are lots of people. If you look at the statistics, it's going to be in the millions. But they're spread out all over the length of the trails. And that's, in all of the years when I've gone through many hearings over putting in new large-scale projects, especially rail trails, a lot of the people would say, no, we don't want them. We don't want those people on that trail. We don't want other people coming. And those people is anybody that wasn't in their community. We don't want anybody. I'm just saying, I've been through a lot of hearings. And inevitably, when those trails are built, and some get built and some don't, but when those trails are built, you do find, because I heard some laughter earlier when the statement, you do find local people use them, through people use them, visitors from out of state and visitors from out of the country. Just as if you're walking on Mount Taurus, you will find people of every nationality, because people do take the train up here when they go to the city to visit, and they come up and they walk through and go and walk, but so do locals, so do I, so do you, so do people from the local catchment area. And I think that that's just what I urge you to think about in terms of comparables. We would not be proposing a project that we thought would be damaging to the communities in which we exist. What we hope is that we can all, as I said earlier, put our minds to figuring out what do we need to have as safeguards, what do we need to do in the planning process, and how do we appropriately assess the information that comes in to be able to make a reasonable decision. And that's where we are.
Yeah, and I think also we had it up earlier, but the phasing. This project isn't going to be built in a year even, right? Just improvements at Breakneck are going to take 2 years to build, and then there'll be another phase. So it's not like a walkway where it all opened one day. It was not open and then it's open. This is going to be improvements here, and then a couple years later, some more improvements. So you get this kind of incremental, so there shouldn't be that big opening day moment that for 7.5 miles and all the attraction that might get. It'll sort of become like, oh, we're opening a new wing. It's just a different type, sort of pacing. And we have some control and discretion. I think that's an important conversation to have too, is sort of what's the strategy on the phasing? What should we open first to kind of allay concerns or to kind of test things out in a way to make sure that, again, it's behaving the way we want it to.
Okay, Mr. May is coming up, and the topic is parking, transportation, and pedestrian safety.
I guess one of the comments begged my question, because you talked about the Poughkeepsie Bridge, and there's access from all different directions and all different sides to the Poughkeepsie Bridge and these other kind of trails. The Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail Trust predicts an increase of hundreds of thousands of visitors annually, with upwards of 66% arriving by vehicle. That's at the firehouse. All vehicles arriving from the south and the east must pass through the traffic light at the intersection of routes 9D and 301 in the village. This does include cars heading to parking lots between Cold Spring and Beacon. Will the DGEIS address this increase in traffic? Specifically, how will the obviously adverse impacts be mitigated pursuant to Section 617.9 of New York Code's Rules and Regulations governing the State Environmental Quality Review?
So that
you're between a rock and a hard place in Cold Spring.
I got it. So Part 617 is the regulations that implement the SEQR regulations, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That is what the draft generic environmental impact statement is doing, so that that will be addressed in that document. We are very lucky. Our sister agency, the New York State Department of Transportation, has just amazing talent in its engineers, designers, traffic control people, traffic access people. They have already been out working with us and with Fjord Trail on, how do we look at safety in that corridor. I personally have not been part of conversations on the intersection of Route 301 and 90 because it's not part of the park, but I believe such conversations have happened. There are conversations with the DOT as to whether or not somewhere along this corridor should a roundabout go in that becomes a traffic calming device. There are discussions of should speed go down. There are discussions of how do you narrow a road, how do you make it so that people are forced to go slower. All of those things go on the table. I'm not saying any of them happen, but they are all the regular traffic calming tools that we have to consider when you start to look at how do you make intersections and junctures safer. So I think that we are lucky that we have a sister agency and we have conversation. There will be a lot of data collected in the course of the draft generic environmental impact statement, and then that will then inform what solutions are proposed.
Yep. But we're not sitting waiting for someone to tell us we have to do something. We want to be helping these conditions. So we've already been meeting with the mayor and Trustee Starbuck and have agreed that we're going to work together with DOT to evaluate solutions to the 90-301 intersection because it's already failing right now. And so I think DOT has some ideas for what could be done there, and we want to be able to kind of work those through with them a bit.
And for clarity, these are initial conversations with DOT, and they come back to public session where minutes are taken and the public can comment. They're village discussions. They'll happen at Village Hall. Am I continuing for you? I am? Yeah. Okay. You're all finished with answering Mr. May's question? So we're moving on to environmental impact and climate change. Grace Kennedy is first, and on deck should be Lauren Martin, Adam Osterfeld, and Susan Peel, please. Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace. Metro North has requested a 25-foot buffer between tracks and trail between Little Stony Point and Breakneck, meaning that every tree along the river would have to be removed to accommodate a 14-foot wide boardwalk cantilevered, shading the shoreline and preventing regrowth. How does this protect against flooding?
Okay. So, yes, we did have to meet setbacks with Metro North. Yes, they are holding us to a 25-foot setback. That's 25 feet from center, not the edge of tie, so it's maybe a little narrower than what you thought. It's also not 14 feet wide in this area because it's such a highly constrained area. So we are as wide as 14 feet in areas like Breakneck Connector, where there's going to be a reasonable expectation of a lot of traffic with the train arrivals, et cetera. We need more width to make that accommodated. Here we will have more width where we can, given the constraints of the corridor, but we're not playing to a 14 feet straight shot sort of concept here, because it is a complicated area. So we've had a study. This was the alignment we worked on with a committee that was basically half Metro North interests and half river-focused interests. And we really hammered through, what those competing interests. It was literally threading a needle here. Gold is golden, means we can meet all of the regulatory requirements of Metro North in terms of setbacks and all of the protective kind of measures for the river. So like mean high, top of bank, there's different regulatory levels that are used as sort of, if you're in that might be problematic for us. We have to have a serious conversation. If you're out of that, you're out of the regulatory zone, it's an easier conversation. So where it's gold, it's golden, and as you can see, that's most of the way. So it's 84.5% of the way. Where it's blue at the time we did this, it meant we knew we had to go around a culvert. There's a 6-foot buffer we need to go around for things with Metro North. So we did have to go into the water for a little bit there. How we go into the water is important though. And where it's pink, that's where, because we didn't get a smaller setback, where it's pink, we're gonna have to go into the water in some way. Does that mean it's heavily in the water? No. We still have to engineer that out and see how much we go into the water. Is it cantilevered? Is it center pile? There's a lot of engineering conversations to still take place. However, we have done a natural resource inventory on the whole shoreline trail place. We have done a tree inventory on this whole stretch. And please know that this includes these trees, right? Because that was part of the thought process there. But 674 trees, greater than 6 inches of caliper, between Little Stony Point and Breakneck Ridge. And only some of them, if you see in this zoom, are actually near the pink line of the trail. And we also had to think about sea level rise, right? Sea level rise is hitting this area. And here's at Little Stony Point, that really has some inundation. And then in this area just south of the tunnel at Breakneck, also being heavily impacted. So what does that mean? And if you remember, this is where this is here. So we looked at that. And then Scape, who's our landscape architect, they have expertise in sea level rise. They do a lot of work in shorelines, including New Orleans kind of areas. And what the trees that were growing there, as those sea levels rise, then you have salinity, right? So you're getting more salty water. It's slowly killing the trees. So they went and looked at these trees and said, with the sea level rise projections, which ones are already sort of being compromised, which ones as the levels go. And the red is compromised by 2050, and the yellow is by 2080, and green is 2010. So where there are ones that are going to stay healthy or longer, we really want to try to keep those on the site. But the other ones that are already dead and dying, they're going. So we factored that into our design process and thought, okay, well, this is the tricky spot where we actually have to go into the water a little bit, but those trees might need to be cleared for that, but they're also on their way out. Whereas here's a fairly healthy spot of trees, and we do have a little bit more room to literally wiggle with. So here we put in wiggles to try to avoid the trees as much as possible. And now it is a structure. I think there's been a lot of conversation about this as a structure, but the structure in the case of the trees, I mean, it's a structure because you have to stay out of sea level rise. It has to be able to handle water in a storm event, and then you have the ability to keep more trees, because if you were doing more site grading, or even if you thought you're going to pile up a lot of fill, you'll bury the roots too deep on the tree and kill the tree anyway. So actually doing the pile driven is going to help us retain more of the trees. And where we do have to go into the water, we've given some special thought and attention to that, to say if we are going in, can we do something like down here, where you put in a planted shelf and help build out some shoreline resilience. So you can have some planted shelves with submerged aquatic vegetation, and as the sea level rise come up and over this boulder, you'll have some migration routes for those SAV beds, which are important habitat areas. So when we do an intervention in the water, we're also going to be doing a habitat and resilience protection underneath.
Okay. Is Lauren Martin in the room? Or were you finished with your response?
One more.
Oh, sorry.
And this just shows other places where we have that, where we might have to go around infrastructure of Metro North, and we could also do a planted shelf piece there. So we're still in the early design. We just brought in a new structural engineer, so that's just started this week. Actually, on the 15th, they put their pencils to paper in earnest, and they'll start design. And we'll bring out those ideas as they evolve.
Thank you. I'm having a terrible time reading Amy's cues. Sorry about that, for cutting you off. Is Lauren Martin here? No. Okay, so I'll read her question. If the environmental review reveals that there will be significant impacts to species such as the New England cottontail, cerulean warblers, and submerged vegetation, will the project be canceled?
So we are state parks. We care deeply about the habitats. We have several biologists in our own staff right within the region and certainly statewide. And we have a process. So you inventory, you look at your baseline, you look at what's out there. And we have, in fact, this picture is a natural resource inventory of Little Stony Point. And that led to sort of changing things around as the design team was looking at what might go there and what might not go there and how it would be placed on the site. So you then, the first step that you do when you're looking at any of these particular endangered, threatened, special concern natural resources is seek to avoid their habitats and seek to avoid any impacts. Built into many of our project permits are you can't tree cut between, November. You can only tree cut after October 31st and until March 31st because of the long-eared bat, northern long-eared bat, because they're nesting and doing things, so unless it's a hazardous tree or other things. And same thing, we seek to avoid, and in cases where you can't avoid, you mitigate. And that determination of mitigation really won't come until the very end, when you determine that whatever your project is and you have to do something in an area that may have an impact, and how would you offset that impact. But always first is avoid, plan around it, see what you can do, minimize, and then mitigate. This is the steps that we would go as we look for how do we deal with any of the various animals or plants that are not invasive, that are threatened and special in the area.
Team finished with that one?
I am.
Okay. Adam Osterfeld?
Good evening, everyone. I worked at Dutchess Art Camp for 7 years every summer while the Long Dock was being created. So I watched the waterfront development at Beacon Station for 7 years from the start. And we know that much of the river shoreline has been disturbed for over 100 years. The restoration at Long Dock brought back wildlife and habitat, including the pollinators and the native plants. What kind of plans are there to restore the natural habitat that existed pre-industrial revolution? And how will the restoration help mitigate the rising water levels caused by climate change? I think some of my question was answered with those last few. Okay. But that's it.
Thanks, Adam.
So hopefully you can see this. I know there's a little bit of a glare. Now, this is a historic map that SCAPE pulled that shows in the dotted line, and this is Breakneck, I believe, the dotted line shows the original shoreline. So you can see how much fill was put in to the river when the railroad was put in. So this would be the Breakneck Connector project area, right? So this is a significant amount of fill, which is just to say it's a highly disturbed shoreline. On top of the railroad, you also had other activities. This is the quarrying. I love this image. The quarrying activity, and this is Little Stony Point. See? So all of this area was fill. And if you remember the sea level rise projections, the sea is going to take it right back. So that's where the sea level rise comes up, is where there was this fill put in. So that also had impacts. And north of that, and there's a lot of brickyard activity. So there's different kind of impacts on the landscape from that prior activity. When you have a lot of disturbance, and especially if you're by a highway corridor or a railroad corridor, you get a lot of invasives then that establish in that disturbed area. So between the train and highway and the Breakneck Connector, and Adam, I just used Breakneck Connector since that's the most designed at this point in time, treat it as a case study for what we would do in other places as well. So right now, mostly settled in with invasives. As we do the restoration, when the improvements are made, it will be using a native plant palette, improving the soils, which are fairly poor right there, and adding new plants that are sourced from local nurseries. So this is a bit of the plant palette that would be put into the Breakneck Connector area. And this just shows you the planting extents in those locations. So it's basically 5.4 acres of native planting restoration in this whole area. Kind of, in this case, not all cases, we're really planting the whole area because it was so highly disturbed. That includes 430 native trees being added to this part of the project area, as well as over 2,000 shrubs that are native, and that doesn't get to the other little perennials. And then just to note that we're including where there's culverts or where we might want somebody to be able to crawl underneath the trail, we are putting in different little wildlife crossings into this. And in the fencing that's in there right now, there are wildlife crossings in that too. Additionally, we have water. Managing water in this area is important. Metro North will say, keep the water off my tracks. So what we want to do is improve the stormwater drainage off of that very steep slope above, better it than what it is right now in terms of stormwater management here. So, and try to create it into sort of a wet garden that would be seasonally wet, or when there's a storm event, it's wet, but then it'll dry out, but we'll have plants that can handle that in that location. And then maybe through the culverts, some water will be pushing in at times, and similarly, this planting pallet will be able to handle that.
Susan.
Hi. Jason, you were going to help me with this, with the explanation?
Yeah, just a quick explanation of a positive declaration and a secret finding. This is just from the New York State DEC website for some context to your question, Susan. A positive declaration is issued if an action is determined to have potentially significant environmental impacts, and an environmental impact statement is required. An applicant must submit a draft environmental impact statement in that finding.
Thank you. And that triggers a public comment period. So 7 significant ecological communities identified by the New York Natural Heritage Program, as well as endangered and threatened species, exist in the trail corridor. A far more modest fjord trail proposal was given a positive declaration, which is a negative, in 2015. What has changed to make these habitats and species less vulnerable now than they were then?
So if you understand seeker, that positive declaration that was just described, is the trigger that allows us to do an environmental impact statement. So if you get what would be called a neg deck, we might have turned around and just said, okay, you have a neg deck, you can go ahead to do your trail. So a pos deck is always used where where you want to do those studies, you want to engage in the public comment, you want to have this process and the analysis that we're going through. The positive declaration that was issued in 2015 is the same positive declaration in which we are operating under right now. It is carried through. This is still an environmental impact process that is going on, and that declaration basically, and I have it here, talks about the trail that runs from City Beacon train station down to the village of Cold Spring train station along the main street in Putnam County. That's the wording in this. It's the type 1 action under seeker, under the regulations that implement seeker. So nothing has changed. This really complicated and funny looking slide, if you look to the very left, step 1, and you can't read it, but I'll just explain, that dark box says, is the action subject to seeker? The answer is yes. Anything, almost anything is subject to seeker these days. If you go to the yellow box, that's where we are. And if you go to the far right, that's where we end up. So all you need to know is this is a process. And it's a process that has sort of ups, downs, and sideways, depending on what comes out of the different information that's collected. You can move to the next slide. Because so we're in a process. The process is the draft environmental impact statement. Nothing has changed in terms of the 7 ecological communities. And an ecological community says, what do you have in plant life and in animal life that impacts sort of what uses a common environment? And these are just identified by the state to help you understand sort of what might be in a particular ecological community. So if you go to the next slide. So we have, and many of you will recognize this from your own neighborhoods or your own backyards, we have oak tulip tree forests in this area. That's one of our ecological communities. And certain plants grow in oak and certain animals live in oak tulip tree forests. Because we have summits on our highlands, we have red cedar rocky summits. We have chestnut oak summit forests. We have Appalachian oak hickory forests. Those are 4 of the sort of plant communities that we have that are considered ecological communities out of the 7. Because we're on the river, we have brackish intertidal mudflats, and we have brackish tidal marsh. And then again, to the very top of the hills, we have that pitch pine oak heath rocky summit where you see the more windswept, lower scrubby growth. Those are the 7 identified ecological habitats that we have, that we plan around, look through, see what's there, and what is impacted by any of the trail. The trail doesn't necessarily go through all of those or any of those, but it is in this catchment area. Go to the next slide. So again, as I said earlier with the question that Lauren asked, we evaluate and inventory and study the area. The first thing that happened when the discussion was for the causeway and linking Little Stony Point to Dockside was Hudsonia was called in to do a baseline evaluation of what was along the shoreline and what was around Little Stony Point. And they're just a well-known, scientifically based organization. We assess the impact, what happens. So for instance, we are in an eagle catchment area, so we always have to know where are nesting eagles, what is the impact of construction, how does it do it. Interestingly enough, most of the eagles don't seem to mind most of the construction, but we have a lot of noise tables, and you see the nests right above the highways all the time. But we have, and eagles, are no longer on the endangered list, but the peregrine falcon is, and the bat is. So we have a bunch of different things that we have, the different levels, whether you're endangered or threatened or a special concern. We avoid the impact to the extent you can. You shift the what might be on a site plan, or you can have restrictions for when you do your construction, or you have monitors, and you mitigate if there's anything that you can't remove. So it's the same answer really as before.
And we've arrived at the last question of the evening, which is coming from Teresa Lagerman, and then we'll roll into the comment period.
Good evening. How will HHFT or the state, anybody's welcome, support the village of Cold Spring to handle the increased strain in its infrastructure that the Fjord Trail will bring? This is very much not a bathroom question. The village, as it is, can barely keep up with sidewalk repairs, garbage pickup, maintenance of the water treatment plant, etc. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned, we're already at the table with the village on this. The next meeting we have planned, we're going to have a map on the table in front of us and really map out issue areas that the village has or needs that the village has, and then we're going to talk about which of those maybe Fjord helps with or which ones we might be able to help the village identify resources for. So that includes, like we mentioned, working on the DOT 90 intersection function. Sidewalk improvements from the train station would be part of what we would think about doing if we went to Dockside. Sidewalk extension on Fair Street, I think in any event. Okay. I'll take it. Evaluate other pedestrian improvement needs is something that the village has been asking for. We're going to, that's part of the study realm that happens over this year. Possible garbage emptying on the waterfront if we go through the Dockside route. We know that's a high volume area. It's a little separated from the rest of Main Street, so it's a sort of a time consuming thing for staff to go that extra way just for those. Retaining village events like fireworks and movie nights at Dockside. We've always committed that If we go the dockside route, we would be working with the village about how that happens. There would be a special community-based planning process to identify what occurs on that site, and we wanted to always make the commitment that if the retaining of those events that happen there now should always be on the table as sort of a given. So that would be a process that would move forward with all of us at the table. Right now, it's just a very swirly site plan. And then helping the village, like I said, identify potential funding opportunities. And we could maybe even help with grant writing for those, since that can be a big lift, especially with state grants. And then we've potentially evolved, and we are continuing to hone ourselves as a visitation management strategy. So that means, looking at infrastructure, providing the infrastructure through the project to help manage visitation, offering the staffing at our cost to maintain the park area and to help manage visitors, including implementing different tools like reservations systems, and then emergency response assistance, offering those services like garbage and bathrooms, like putting them in and then maintaining them, technology and tools to help manage visitation, and that includes demand management like pricing, reservations, etc. So the project has it baked in to help do that, and we'll continue to refine that with your input. I don't read slides, but yes. So that's it.
Okay.
Okay, you guys are all set?
So we have a sign-in.
Yes. So we do have the sign-in sheet, which was available from 6:30 to 7 p.m. Sorry, did you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. So there was a sign-in sheet that was posted between 6:30 and 7 p.m. We will try to get through as many of these speakers as possible between now and 9:30. So the first one is 3-minute limit. Yes, there's a 3-minute limit on speaking. So first up is Gretchen Dykstra.
Good evening. So just to give Gretchen space, the more we applaud, the fewer questions we get to. So let's just keep moving through questions.
I oppose the Fjord Trail's current design for the many environmental and logistical reasons that others have cited. How did a community-driven, modest, and realistic scheme morph into a grandiose attraction on public land, already receiving millions of taxpayers' dollars? I choose to focus on the money. There is no overall construction budget, at least that the public has seen. But before final approvals, final drawings, and value engineering, responsible developers, including large not-for-profit organizations, always estimate construction costs. Scenic Hudson and its subsidiary should be held to that same standard, and most importantly, Albany should demand it. I have equally deep concerns about the lack of long-term operating budget and the total lack of any public discussion on that essential issue. Staff say parking and fundraising will support the project, but more than 2 years ago, the New York State Parks gave the tiny Fjord Trail project the right to sell sponsorships, encourage paid promotions, and establish concessions along the trail. Staff never mentioned that. The day they take possession of Dockside and Little Stony Point, budget realities will hit. Liability insurance alone will be astronomical, and the higher their costs, the greater the incentive to monetize public space. I am opposed to privatizing public land. And if they cannot raise money to maintain 7.5 miles of trail, guess who will pay? The taxpayers. So New York State Parks signed a contract with a new, small, not-for-profit organization with no guarantees from its parent, Scenic Hudson. That shows raw political power on the part of Scenic Hudson and poor judgment on the part of our elected and appointed officials. I worked for I worked for several high-profile public-private partnerships in the city. One was driven by ethical public servants and experienced volunteers who cared about transparency and true community participation and had no financial conflicts. The Times Square bid was a model of openness and efficiency. Another was messy and wasteful. The public was told that the private donors would pay for the $350 million project, but when it ultimately cost $1.3 billion, guess who paid the difference? The taxpayers. Our elected officials are way behind the 8 ball. All across the nation, under growing pressure, state and local governments are developing better policies and procedures to guarantee that local communities have access to all the information relevant.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jeff Burstein.
Hey,
There is not. This is public comment. We will address.
Well, my question is not written down, or my comment is not written down, so I may stumble. My original question was, if the whole community is against this, is there any legal way anymore that we could stop this if we wanted to? But that seems like that's been answered because this is state land. And at the end of all the studies, when it's all done, and here's the final plan, this is the plan, this is it, we don't want it, the state can just say, this is our land, go ahead and do whatever they want. We can't stop this. You know, that being the case, I was wondering, because you folks have spoken about this being not only a partnership, a public-private partnership, but also with the community, meaning Philipstown, Cold Spring, Nelsonville, I guess Garrison, all of the Philipstown villages. Would the state be willing to submit at the end, when the final plan, here it is, this is the plan, guys, would the state be willing to submit to a binding referendum for all the citizens of Philipstown to vote just yes or no? No comments, vote yes or no, and if the no's rule, that's the end of the project. And maybe it would go back to the original small trail that was proposed.
Sorry? Sheila Roush.
I'm going to be very quick. The problem for me is that you guys understandably talk about a world-class linear park, and proudly. And then you also say, it's not going to bother you, it's just going to be locals that use it. And we're worried about traffic. You haven't done a traffic study. I understand you're doing it. But to have us in this state of anxiety about traffic, and you have nothing to say about it, and when you do, I'm really thankful that we're going to have a traffic monitor ourselves. I'm really thankful about that. But when you do deliver the DGEIS, apparently there are only 30 days to review it. Not so. Well, that's good. But you've already begun the breakneck connector, at least your literature says so. Yes? Begun it. You got a pos deck, a neg deck. What's the good one? The negative. You got a neg deck. And you can understand that that causes a lot of anxiety. We're very worried about traffic. And just complete swarming of Cold Spring. So, there are these two things.
Thank you, Sheila. Rick Franco.
Hi.
Hi, Rick.
Thanks for letting
You're welcome.
me ask the question. So, I don't know, I guess it was about 4 years ago when I got one of your glossy magazines, and it said that you were going to reimagine the trail. And that scared the heck out of me, because that meant you were starting from scratch. So starting from scratch, anything could happen. And anything did happen. We went from, I've been going to all of the meetings. At this point here, the trail was, and I think somebody mentioned that, it was pretty much gravel with a little bit of pebbles in between. And then all of a sudden, it became apparent that there was going to be a concrete walkway. And that was a lot different. So at that point, I gave up on the project. And there was no way to, now that the project got to that point, there was no way to deal with it. So I just, stood back. And all I'm doing at this point is hoping somebody can, put their foot out and trip it. And,
I can't.
So we're struggling with handwriting. It looks like Mei Yi or
Yi,
Jeff Robbins.
Jeff Robbins or Mei Yi.
So it's clearly the problems of overvisitation and traffic and safety have been core. That was in the original proposal. And yet we have a new proposal now that is greatly expanded with many amenities, with a riverfront boardwalk. Those are all things that are going to increase visitation, perhaps exponentially. And these are the very problems that the proposal was originally slated to address. So this is something that many are concerned with, because I see in the questions that were submitted, my question is, how can this project be restored to its original scope, which can protect the quality of life here and the environment?
So if it is a question and you'd like an answer, we will allow them to provide an answer. Would you guys be interested in answering that? But we had decided if there was a question, we would respond to a question. Is that a question that you'd like?
Yes.
But John, others had asked questions and not had an
No, they've made statements.
So I think there's a lot of information, and I'll be very short because I think what we'll do is just write up some answers to these questions, since we're not doing equal treatment on all of them right now. But I think there's a lot of misinformation about what the plan used to be and how simple and it was. And there's just certain realities of building something on the Metro North right-of-way, for example, right, where you're going to have fencing, or you have sea level rise and it's going to have to be elevated. So I think there's a perception of simplicity in terms of the main trail. Let's forget about the add-ons that Ned asked about. But in terms of the main trail, there's a sense of simplicity out there that I don't think ever really was on paper. So
I just want to add, there is an alternative. We've talked about Fair Street, 9D. A simpler alternative would be less costly, less of an attraction actually for visitation, that could connect to Cornish And why is that, not being considered?
It's in the alternative. So we have the preferred alignment, and then that's going to get run through all the paces on the environmental review, and we'll see, and we'll keep talking about this. But I do think we should be seeing how this works. Like, does it work the way we think? I always think about it like a water balloon. If you want to get people out of town as quickly as possible, maybe you need 3 holes in that water balloon instead of just Fair Street, right? So do we have more than one route that people can take, and then you're sort of distributing that impact someplace? So I'd like, the answer is there's still time to talk about this, but I think we need to really look at each of these from all sides.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wynn. Thank you very much. Derek Graham, 32 West Street. Hi, Derek.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I prepared a brief statement for you, and I'll read from it. The idea of a trailhead at our dockside is antithetical and counterintuitive to the present challenges our village endeavors to remediate to this very day. It will exacerbate what is already epic levels of traffic compression and visitor saturation, while at the same time the developers boast that the addition of a dockside trailhead will in fact somehow solve or mitigate these problems, not only along its 7-mile corridor, but specifically our village. In other words, more is less. However, there is not a single document published that bears out this fantasy, and I fear no document will ever support this fiasco. This we call conjecture. The developer team understands these challenges and has been gracious in providing opportunities for the public to comment. The team includes stellar designers, professionals, and they're good at most of what they do. However, pro forma and feasibility studies are not their strong suit. There are no such studies for our village. This we call putting the horse before the cart. The developer promises amenities to Dockside Trailhead that purportedly fall under the category of enhanced infrastructure, such as restrooms and refuse collection. These amenities are chiefly in service of enhanced tourism. The village would only need these services to support these additional tourist loads. Although the developers and our village officers have scheduled local studies, I can't think of anything they would draw out that which we don't already know, such as the Lower Village Master Plan was developed well before the Civil War and was never intended to be a mega-volume tourist destination. The physical space simply isn't there. Until 2016, the trail plan made at least some sense when it did not involve a fourth and redundant boardwalk to Little Stony Point. Like as not, these access thoroughfares, including 9D and Fair Street, will continue to be used by tourists to access the trail system for the reasons that they are the shortest routes and that Dockside is generally inaccessible. Access to a Dockside trailhead would be limited by the scarcity of parking and even walking space for a potential tsunami of tourists. Most village residents understand these realities and see Dockside as one of the last natural refuges within our boundaries. Landing a trailhead at Dockside would be an existential threat tantamount to dropping a nuclear warhead on Hackensack. It's simply too big, and the benefits are equally as small as the constituency who advocates such folly. As I have said, the Dockside trailhead represents a superfluous burden and compromise to the small village way of life, our ability to peaceably enjoy our own backyard without having to compete with throngs.
Thank you, sir. Next up. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Time is up. Thank you very much. Sit down. Thanks. Thank you. How about it? Paul Cotman. What? Hi, Paul.
Don't worry, I'll continue where Derek left off, basically at the same time. So from what I understand, I'm really addressing this to my neighbors, so I'll turn this way. My understanding is that we don't have the authority to cancel the project. What we do have is the chance to influence the final form it will take. So for those of us with deep concerns about the potential impact of the park on our village, we should collectively think about how we can effectively exert the influence we have in the short time available to us. As a resident of Fair Street, I'm aware of the dangers of too much foot traffic in the village. And initially, I was intrigued by the possibility that some of that traffic would be diverted for safety reasons, above all. But it's becoming clear to me, and here I agree with Derek, that the plan to start and end the fjord trail at Dockside would be, I like the image of a nuclear weapon, I think that's about right, would be extremely disruptive, is what I had written, to the village, and perhaps do little or nothing to improve the situation on Fair Street or Garden Street. Moreover, Dockside Park is the nicest public park in New York State, it seems to me. Putting the fjord trail there would ruin it, create a traffic snarl in the village, worse than all the problems it allegedly was there to address, and forever turn Cold Spring into a very different, and from my point of view, less desirable place to live. So I would urge that we in the room who care about this get behind a plan to push the start of the trail at least to Little Stony Point, and at the same time that we push for the changes that were put on the slide to be made to Fair Street to make the foot traffic there less dangerous. I believe Little Stony Point had been the original, or one of the original starting places for the park, and it may be one of the better options available to us. I'm happy to push it back further if we can. Let's get behind, in any case, let's get behind our elected officials and bolster the influence they still have over the next year or two to make sure the new park starts further north than Dockside. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty D'Amato. Hi, Patty.
Good evening. I live on Stone Street in the village, 1 block north of Main Street, 1 block east of the Depot Restaurant. It was my husband's childhood home. We decided to leave our quiet street in Nelsonville after living there for 40 years to move into his parents' home because it was a good house in which to grow old. As much knowledge as we had of the difficulties in Cold Spring prior to 2020, nothing could have prepared us for what has happened. We welcome tourists. Phil and I are out on our porch all the time. We give directions. We give restaurant recommendations. We suggest places for people to visit. One couple came from Long Island with their toddler, and they said to us, "Is your town like this all the time?" I said, "It's become like that." I said, "Let me ask you something. How did you find Cold Spring?" "Well, we Googled nice places to visit." Then there are the people who ask for directions, and I'll make conversation and I'll say, "What do you think of our waterfront?" "What? You have a waterfront?" People don't do research before they come. They're coming here to have a lovely day. I tell them about the beauties of this community, but we're losing the beauty of this community. We can't walk on Main Street during the week, on the weekends, and now during the week as well. I was driving down Main Street the week after Easter, a beautiful day. Somebody was parallel parking in front of the coffee house. I waited for that person, and the cars behind me started laying on their horns because they didn't have the patience to wait. You're also assuming that people are going to go and take the shuttle. That's not going to happen. They're going to drive down Main Street, they're going to drive down Main Street, go past Susie's Dance Dialogue, over to the street that goes to Mumu's, and they're going to drop off their families there. If I want to bring my parents in their 80s, I am not going to go to Duchess Manor, which only has 200 parking spaces, and I'm not going to make them get on a shuttle that on some days is going to run from 8 in the morning till 8 at night.
Thank you,
I'm
Betty.
coming to Cold Spring.
Thank you. Peter Henderson.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say that I share my fellow residents' concerns that this project will overwhelm this community, especially if it starts at Dockside. But I did want to ask Parks, who is in fact the project sponsor as well as the lead agency for this project, to provide some clarification on the town's role in this process. So Parks has told us tonight that this is a Parks project, and we are in the process of conducting the environmental impact study. Additionally, Supervisor Van Tassel has said on multiple occasions, including at last month's board meeting, that this is not a town project. But the record says differently. I've looked closely at all the documentation related to the environmental review process, so I'm familiar with everything that's part of the public record for this project, including the 2015 draft master plan, the scoping documents outlining exactly what will be covered in the EIS, and the town's application for local waterfront revitalization program grant money for the design work for the shoreline portion of the trail, and the town's contract with AKRF for all the work related to the environmental impact study. So regarding the grant money, back in 2016, the town was awarded $400,000 from the Department of State's LWRP program and received matching funds of $400,000 from the Hudson Highlands Land Trust to finance, design, and engineering work for the trail and to complete the environmental impact statement, which isn't yet finished. Then, in 2017, the town of Philipstown signed the contract with AKRF and became the designated contract administrator for the EIS work. The new 2020 plan represents the grandiose vision for the trail as a linear park and a major tourist attraction, starting from Dockside, with a 2+ mile stretch of 14-foot wide elevated boardwalk, and it also turns Little Stony Point into an amusement park, none of which was part of the 2015 draft master plan, which was supposed to be the central study point for the EIS. There's nothing in the public record to indicate what took place between the end of 2017 and 2020, when a new and completely different master plan was published. I don't think many people knew of this plan's existence before HHFT started promoting it in 2021. Yet it was at that time that the town adopted in its new 2030 comprehensive plan an action item to support the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Would you like a response to that? Yes. Yes? Okay. No? Yes. Yes. Okay, thank you. Richard, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I would. I think it's unfair to John to be saddled with this supposition that he has control over the fjord trail. That was during my tenure. Those grants were given to the town for studies when we were the grant administrator at that time. So the town was acting essentially as a clearinghouse with AKRF to do the studies about the original master plan. Now, since then, this process has gone on, and there have been other studies, and as was alluded to, there are several other studies pending in the secret process. So when you're saying the town has control over the project, that's not true. The town was an administrator for a grant. So that's the fundamental truth there.
And the town was fully reimbursed for every dollar that was spent.
Yeah, there was no public money spent.
No, absolutely not. Thank you. Yes, next person on the list. John Zuvik.
John, I'm surprised to see you here without a basketball.
You want to start the clock?
I'll tell you when. Ready?
Go.
Yep, starting. But we're ready.
We're ready. Let's go. We're running out of time here.
John, others may want to ask questions. Can you use the mic, please, so everybody can hear?
Okay. Where do I start? I don't know where to start. I've written about half a dozen different statements. Since before Thanksgiving, I've had meetings almost every day on this. After March Madness, it's been meetings with people or groups every day. Being conflicted is to put it mildly. Someone in this room, who's in this room right now, asked me which side I was on. And I'm a team player. I don't profess to be on sides. I'm trying to move this forward. So I'm not on a side. I'm very conflicted. I'm seeing a therapist for the second time in my life every 2 weeks. The first time I had to see the therapist was when I got married to my wonderful wife the second time. All kidding aside, this is a serious impact statement. The endangerment across the spectrum of life as we know it around here is in many ways a positive declaration. Translation, not good for the neighborhood. Somewhat like the last hurricane that came through that killed a lot of deer and introduced more weeds for us to go through. To cut to the chase right now, I urge Parks to truly be the lead agency and issue a work stop order on this somewhat ill-conceived project. I'm upset that Breakneck was segmented and the whole project should have been considered and they should not proceed on with Breakneck as far as I believe. So I urge Parks to put a stop work order on this if they can. OPRHP, the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Parks, please put some emphasis on the preservation piece that's surely in our mission statement around here. I'm not sure how many times the well-meaning designers have been back at the get-go on the drawing board, but it's time to revisit that and go back to square one. I know for a fact, this is a fact, that some of the partners that have been listed by HHFT claim to have had input from on this project through a steering committee has been in name only. I've been involved with Little Stony Point since its inception, about 40 years now, and I was waiting and looking for the invitation to get my 2 cents in, and it never came. We had representatives, but it was never going that way. It always came this way, what this sketchy proposed plan was going to be. So now, recently...
Thank you, John.
To be continued.
Thank you. We're going to take one more? Okay, we have 2 minutes left. John Scheineman.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for facing all of us. I do not live in the village. I live up on Jake Hudson, Philipstown, so my perspective is a little bit different. But all the concerns I share, we are overloaded already. And I think one of the things which they've said which hasn't resonated is that the problem is here now. Whether this gets approved or not, we have a huge overvisitation problem. Now, the Fjord Trail is an attempt to deflect some of that traffic off of Fair Street, 9D, and all the rest of the things. Give another option for people who are already coming, they're already here, to get to the trails. Now, I have some specific concerns. One, without a traffic study, to have even this level of discussion is sort of stupid, honestly, because we're talking fantasy. We don't know what proposals are out there or even know what they're going to be saying are the criteria. But let's talk about the trail itself. I'm a cyclist. I've stopped cycling in this area because it's just too bloody dangerous. It's overloaded, the drivers are texting, there are no shoulders on roads. So I am delighted that there's a rail trail somewhere that I don't have to drive 45 minutes to get to. However, if you are constructing this thing to accommodate everybody, I don't see how a 12-foot, 10-foot, or 14-foot wide trail is going to accommodate cyclists, pedestrians who are walking to hiking trails or walking to some of the other venues, people with disabilities. Now, I worked in mass tourism over at West Point. I ran the public tourism program over there. I am very familiar with ADA requirements, even though they don't have to follow them. But I don't see how that limited space is going to accommodate all these different audiences that you have that you're projecting are going to use it. Cyclists alone on a two-way, 10-foot wide, that is very narrow. That's like one cycle going one way, one cycle the other. Where are all the rest of the people going to be? And I'd also like to put another comment out there. What are you going to do about electronic bicycles? Because if you allow things to go 30 miles an hour on that, there will be bloodshed. Enjoy.
Thank you. That'll be it for the public comment. We are now going to get a closing statement. Chris?
And just like to say on behalf of all the boards, we greatly appreciate everybody coming out tonight to tell us your opinions, your views, your thoughts, and your concerns. We greatly appreciate Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail and the parks, New York State Parks, for coming. I know that this is very difficult. We really appreciate you being willing to do so.
Can I get a motion to adjourn for the town board, please? Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
And for the Village of Cold Spring, a motion to adjourn, please. Second. Tweeps, all in favor? Aye.
And for the village of Nelsonville, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? A motion? Maria, second. Dave, thank you.